welcome back once again, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new podcast from The Save Point. I am your host, Joker.
I'm your co-host, Shephard. Welcome to episode 2, bitches.
Episode 2. We are making great progress with these podcasts, and it's actually a pretty fun kind of format that we're dipping our toes into, kind of flexing the creative muscles into doing this. Shephard, my friend, how are you today, this evening, this night, wherever you may be?
I am absolutely fan-dabby-dozy, man. I'm feeling good, vibing with the whole podcasty thing. I'm still not getting used to this. It's new to me. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, my friend. I'm doing pretty well. Feeling good, and really, really excited to kind of dive into this next topic that we're going to have this open dialogue about, which is kind of it's a very broad topic, I think. It was one of those kind of titles that I was hemming and hawing about for the longest time. And it's an unusual one in the sense of, like, I know that the last kind of podcast episode we did was our hot takes, kind of moments in like gaming moments that kind of irks us, or things in the gaming universe that kind of strikes a wrong chord with us, and things like this, you see. And that was a really, really fun thing to do, because a lot of the time, even with the YouTube videos that we do, it's kind of much more scripted. We know what we're talking about, and then we kind of compare and contrast our opinions, our feelings on these kind of topics. So it's nice to have a little free form kind of flow of dialogue here, which I'm really enjoying, I must say.
Yeah, even you pitched the subject to me actually weeks ago, but over Christmas and New Year's and things, it was a bit difficult to kind of set aside the time to record. And as you said, it's a bit more free form, quite malleable compared to what we've really discussed before on both the YouTube and on the podcast. Quite outside our wheelhouse, I would say, because it's not even specific to either a genre or the topic is quite broad, which I think is quite interesting. It's a nice change of pace.
Yes, absolutely. And the people who are going to be listening to this either on our YouTube channel, which we really do appreciate it, or even on their Spotify channel, you're going to be seeing this title now. And the title is But It's Just a Game. And that in and of itself is like, well, how do you go about describing a title like this? And this is where I kind of had the idea of sharing this dialogue with you. So I think we'll just kick right into it. And I've got a couple of questions for you, mate. I haven't told you about what I was going to say to you.
Yeah, I'm going in completely blind here. I have no idea what's coming, what's around the corner. So forgive me if I stutter or if I talk absolute bollocks.
This is what this is for, though. These podcasts are for us to talk absolute bollocks.
Yeah, that's our goal in life.
Well, this is it. Like, Shephard, quick question for you. Do you remember the first video game you ever played?
Oh, you fucker.
The first one. The very first video game. The very
first game I ever played, I'm fairly certain was... Ooh, that's tough. My brother would know this. He has the memory for this kind of thing. I don't. The first video game I remember playing...
Let's say you remember playing, rather than the first definitive one. The first one you remember playing. The
first video game I remember playing, and this will certainly age me, is Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Mega Drive. It's the Mega Drive over here. It's the Sega Genesis everywhere else. Yeah. The Mega Drive. It was Sonic the Hedgehog, and I remember being blown away. It was colourful. It was bright. The music was gorgeous.
Green Hill Zone 1, man.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's good shit. And yeah, like, it was the first video game that I remember playing, but it wasn't the first. I'm probably going to go on a ramble now.
No, please go ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, Shephard is going to take this on his journey now, so I can't wait to hear this. Yeah. I am throwing you under the bus now. I am throwing you under the bus with these questions, but there's a reason
he's
for it.
He's going to come back at me. Yeah, you're going to come back at me with something. I know you are. I suppose the first game, Sonic the Hedgehog, 2D, 16-bit, gorgeous sprites. The first game that kind of captured me, if you want to go a different route with it, was Super Mario 64.
Okay.
Because that was the
Nintendo 64.
On the Nintendo 64. It was
the first console, 3D, right? The first 3D,
the first 3D
open
Mario
world. I'm feigning ignorance in this. Okay, I'm sorry to cut across you. Because I never had a Nintendo 64, but I specifically remember as a child playing Super Mario Brothers 3, I believe, on the SNES.
Yeah.
That was with Yoshi and Luigi and Princess Peach and the mushroom kid, whatever his name was.
Toad,
that was it. But sorry to cut across you. So You were
No,
talking
not at all.
about the N64.
Yeah, so it's kind of there's a lot of personal reasons for it. Is that the N64 was kind of the first console me and my brother owned as kids. We got it shortly after our parents separated, and Super Mario 64 was the first game we popped in, and it was like, oh my god, this is like the shit. This is the future. I remember one night my auntie was over and she was talking to my mom. Again, everyone was kind of raw after the. Sorry, I'm getting into real personal territory here, but you brought it up. Everyone was quite still. Everyone was quite still emotionally charged. There was a lot going on. And my auntie was downstairs talking to my mom. I was supposed to have gone to bed, but I was sneaking down to play my new video game.
Yeah.
And I remember spending the night showing it off to my mom and my auntie, and it was like, oh, this is
Really?
the greatest thing ever. Yeah, weird, very weird.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So okay, so I suppose to answer your question, first game I remember playing, Sonic the Hedgehog. First game that made an impact, Super Mario 64.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, the reason I'm asking is because, like, and you kind of touched on it there, like, you obviously introduced your mom and your aunt to this game when you were going through quite a heavy time as a child, you know. But the funny thing is, and I mean this with the greatest respect when I say the funny thing is though, it's just a game.
I knew you were going to say that.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but isn't it amazing how, like, the platform of video games and visual interactivity can shield somebody from a trauma, or shield somebody from going through something like something as heavy as that. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there who could relate to that, not even through video games, but through sports, through music. I did a lot through that, through music. And going on the topic of video games, which is what this whole channel is about, I remember going through a really serious case of laryngitis, and I was actually off work for it must have been about 2 weeks or something like this. And kind of the game that got me through that was Persona 5 Royal. So immediately I had a link towards that. It was my comfort blanket. It kind of distracted me from what else I was going through, what else was happening at the time. And it's amazing because when you try to describe this to somebody who isn't really a gamer, I use that with quotation marks, who is a gamer, and you tell them about the impact it's had on you, or how it made you feel, or how it almost gave you a form of comfort, and they say, "But yeah, it's just a game." But no, it's not really a game. Like, if you probably turn on your favorite movie or your favorite TV series, and it's just as easy for me to say, "But it's just a movie; it's not real," or "It's just a TV series; it's not real."
On that subject, actually, just talking about how video games kind of help with trauma or personal grief or anything like that. Years ago, I went through a fairly rough breakup, and you may remember I called you immediately after it happened. That's how long we've been friends, by the way.
Yeah, geez, it's nearly
that call
14,
was over
12 years,
something like that. That call was over 8 years ago.
Wow, I remember specifically where I was then. I was actually playing, believe it or not. I remember it. I think I was playing an Assassin's Creed title, and I immediately paused it, and I was like, "What's going on here?" Yeah.
Well, see, that's it. So I had just bought a PS4 a couple of weeks before this breakup, and the game
Mass Effect.
No, actually.
Oh, okay.
It was Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor.
Oh, yes. Yeah. The Warner Brothers title. Yeah.
Yeah. It came out in, I think it was 2014. I had picked it up, and I was kind of casually enjoying it at first, and then the breakup happened.
Yeah.
And that was then a game that I sunk dozens of hours into.
Mm-hmm.
I completed everything. I didn't exactly platinum the game, but I went for a 100% completion run in the playthrough I was on, because I was so engrossed in this new thing, essentially. And I was like, okay, you know what? The real world's kind of shit right now. I'm going to focus on this. Focus on me. Focus on anything else other than what's happening.
In a bizarre way of things, though, you could almost relate to what Talion was going through. He's gone through a trauma.
Yeah,
you could
personal
relate
loss.
To it.
He lost someone he cared about.
That's
now,
it.
The circumstances were different, but it was the same kind of. He was, yeah. You know what? My ex wasn't killed by an orc, and we didn't have a kid together as well, so that helped.
Yeah.
Not even an orc; it was the Black Hand of Sauron or something.
Yeah. It was like Sauron's lieutenants or something like this.
Yeah, one of them pussies. You know what I mean?
Which was still a better boss fight than Sauron at the end of that game. I'm gonna say it now. Fucking QTEs.
that's a whole other subject we'll have to tackle one day, is our worst bosses.
Mm.
Ooh, oh, a teaser.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, it's funny because that's one of the examples I remember more of kind of a video game helping me through stuff. Mass Effect, as much as I love it, it never kind of lined up with personal events in my life. They were just on their own captivating stories and games that hooked me in. But stuff like Shadow of Mordor, it was just kind of right place, right time.
Mm.
And that's true of other games as well. Nothing springs to mind through the years because I play a lot of video games. It's kind of my big thing. Like you and I, we're less than 5 hours away from the release of Persona 4 Golden on modern consoles, which is something
Yeah,
we're very excited about. But hey, that's just a game and not one we've even really played.
yeah, but it's the excitement that's kind of generated around it now, which is, and even then, kind of going back to the title of this podcast, it's like, yeah, but it's just a game. Why are you so excited for it? And it's again, it's hard to kind of describe it to people who aren't in our scene.
Mm.
Um, it's a really kind of awkward one to talk about, but there's always kind of going to be those plus sides and negative sides to talking about a topic like this. But kind of rewinding it back to what you said there, when you go to play Shadow of War now, having gone through what you went through, and this game was kind of like your distraction, I suppose, or your security blanket, do you find it difficult to play now?
I actually haven't touched it since. It's
Is
a
that
game
so?
that's kind of, I've played the sequel, Shadow of War.
Yeah,
Um,
which is a
but
bit lackluster.
Yeah,
It's,
I've never finished it. I think a part of it was I played Shadow of Mordor so much that I find Shadow of War kind of like a bit more repetitive as a result. It's like, okay, I've
mm,
already done a lot of this, and there's new stuff and whatever. That's fine.
mm-hmm,
But Shadow of Mordor was the game that I sank dozens of
mm,
hours into, and I think that's it. I've touched everything there is to touch in that game. I don't need to go back. It's kind of, I associate it with that part of my life as well. I'm not saying if I opened it up, I'd bawl my eyes out. Like, oh my god, why did she leave me? It's been a decade. Um, but it's kind of, it was almost as if, okay, so a chapter of my life closed, and I finished that game, and that game was like the epilogue to that chapter.
mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, like there's certain games like that I play that I've showed off to not even necessarily people I've been with romantically, but even friends,
Hmm.
and some
Just
friends
parts
who,
of your life, yeah.
yeah, they just kind of fade away, or some pass away, or whatever it might be. And even it's kind of like, I know it's there and I could play it if I wanted to, but that was like a certain part of my time that it was a chapter of my life, and it's kind of, I've written that chapter and now I'm moving on to the next page, which
Absolutely.
which kind of leads me to the other question is, like, if we're talking about this whole, oh no, but it's just a game, why are you getting so broke up and emotional about it? I suppose I'm kind of leading the dialogue at the moment, which is the way I wanted it to go, because I've got so many things I want to ask you on this, because just listening to you talk about your own experiences, like, I know we've known each other for the guts of nearly half 15 years, or whatever it might be. But the other question that I was asking, like, if it's just a game, what has been, if you could give me like two or three titles that you've played which hit you so fucking hard that when somebody said to you, what's wrong? And it was almost like, look, I'm after just experiencing something right now over the space of 23 or 22 hours, how long this title may have been, just leave me alone and give me some space. And then when you explain it and somebody says, but it's just a game, why are you letting it bother you? Like, one that comes to me, like, I'm sure you might agree with me, and it's been talked about to death now at this stage. Ironically, death in the title is The Walking Dead Season 1 by Telltale. But that was a title that kind of spanned over 5 2 or 3 hour episodes, where your choices and consequences affect everything around you, your group that you're with, your relationship with Clementine, how she grows up to be the person that she turns out to be. If you choose to kind of continue the story on by carrying on your saves, I think there's an option to do that, or you can tailor the story around your choices. But I'm interested in knowing, like, was there any titles that made you just go, oh, God damn, why did they do that to me?
Well, I was actually going to say the first one that came to mind was The Walking Dead. specifically season 1. And I only said to you recently that I've only finished season 4, and that ended on quite a surprisingly optimistic note for The Walking Dead. And that was good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was the end of Clementine's story, and like, cool, that's a good way to end it. But season 1 was the one that struck a chord. Again, it was kind of a right place, right time situation. It came out at a time when I was starting to play more kind of story focused stuff, and I kind of needed it in my life. And I'm glad I played it when I did. It was great to experience. I distinctly remember waiting months and months between episodes.
Wasn't there like a 4 or 5 month waiting period before the episodes?
Per episode, yeah. Like it was dire.
Telltale were so stretched out around that time because they were focusing on doing The Wolf Among Us, and then they had their Game of Thrones thing that they tried. I'm using that term really loosely. Tried.
See, that was it. Is the first season kind of caught people by surprise. I don't think they expected it to take off the way it did. So I think while they were developing season 1, that's when they were getting all these orders in for other stuff. It's like, oh man, it's like everyone, they want us to do Batman, they want us to do Game of Thrones, they want us to do Borderlands. Yeah, Wolf Among Us, all this other stuff. And I imagine they finished season 1 before. I don't know the timelines. It was around season 2 when they kind of exploded.
Yeah, I think it was in the center part of season 1. I think that it really exploded. Like after episode like 2, that was when like the hunger started coming towards them, and like they said, well, these are probably the only company who are now doing the multiple choice kind of narrative. I know that Quantic Dream really touched on it with, you had the likes of Fahrenheit, then you had the likes of Heavy Rain, which was still in that kind of transitional period. But I think what Telltale brought to the table was the unique kind of cell shading art style, that comic booky kind of art style that hadn't really been touched upon properly, you know?
Yeah, it was a great time because it did kind of emulate the comic book feel. And this was also following on from the popularity of the TV series. So the TV series was a couple of seasons in at this stage. So people were like, they wanted more Walking Dead. It's like, oh, here's this kind of tailored story experience with good voice acting, good writing. And yeah, I think it's as you said as well, the second episode kind of cemented the series because it had decisions with consequence. And you saw how the decisions from the first episode carried in and everything like that. So it was very important in that respect.
But was that one of those titles that really kind of like stuck a nail through your heart and you were like, oh God? Yeah,
for sure.
The ending specifically, or was there any part in the series itself?
The whole thing, but generally anything with Lee and Clementine. But the ending, where Lee says his last words to Clementine was the part that I was like, oh, because I'd been waiting months, and it was like, oh my God, I was there with Lee. I was like, I need to protect this child with my life, and it is just a game, but much like any sort of fiction, any fictional medium, if you are captivated, if it goes out of its way to make you believe that these characters are real people, then when things happen to them, they happen to you. Now, games like The Walking Dead take that one extra step because you're the one making some of the decisions along the way. So you're the one who has to pay for those decisions. Emotionally, not physically, thankfully. But I suppose another game that kind of got me. This is a tough ass question.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm really throwing you here. But there's a reason why I'm throwing you under the bus here with these questions, and it kind of reverts back to the title of it. It's just a game. But it's amazing how a character that you're controlling, it's just a linear like block of code on a screen. But I suppose it's how the story is interwoven, how the music affects the narrative. It's how the characters that you meet and the story that they're going on. It's like you almost feel like you're in charge of everything going on around you. And when things go south, you feel you're responsible for it going south, albeit if it's out of your character's control. Like Lee gets bitten in the I think it's the 4th episode of The Walking Dead.
At the end of the 4th episode.
It's the end of the 4th, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to wait months to see the resolution to that at the time.
Exactly.
So that kind of resonates with you. Yeah, you're like, oh, I know that my time with Lee is coming to an end.
It's going so short, And even if you look at the opening to, I know it's very hot at the moment, but the Last of Us, when in the opening sequence, you have Joel, Tommy, and and Sarah escaping their home essentially, and they're running away and trying to escape the outbreak. And then when you have that moment when the army guy points his rifle and fires at them, and Joel survives, but Sarah doesn't. She gets shot and she bleeds out. But it was like in the first opening sequence, like you see the brutality, you see the pure visceral survival kind of primal instinct in people kicking in. And that was only a 20-minute sequence or half an hour sequence. And you're even playing as Sarah at the beginning of the game. And then she dies in Joel's arms. And that kind of cements his kind of character for the next 20 years when you meet up with Ellie in the end, or at the start of the, officially at the start of the game. But I remember when I'm sorry to just kind of cut across you, just like just making the point that I remember when I played the Last of Us, and that opening sequence when the voice acting was so beautifully done, like you actually feel like this, like it's pure sadness coming out of a father losing his only child. And you think about it and it's like, but it's just a game. Why is it striking me so hard? It's like, well, it's not just that. It's the performance around it. Like you could look at that as part of a movie and still feel so moved towards it. Which in and of itself is a rather interesting medium. I'm one of these people who was screaming from a mountaintop that, like, for me, video games are like the perfect art form for they're the perfect art form for engrossing a player into the story, taking them on this journey, and the consequence that goes on and the actions and the results that goes on in this world. They're being driven towards the player, not the character that you're playing as, but the player. They're specifically being driven towards you as the person holding the controller. And I don't think any other medium does that to justice. But the second title that you were thinking of there,
probably a bit cliche, but it would be The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask.
Now, I know we had a chat about this briefly on the Save Point YouTube channel, and I'm going to feign ignorance here. I have never played a Legend of Zelda game. I never had a Nintendo 64, so I'm feigning ignorance and saying I've never played it, and I will hold my hands up and say I've never played it. But based on the video that we did, I know that you said that the whole game is a spiritual successor to Ocarina of Time. It takes place over the space of 3 days when the moon is literally falling towards the planet, and you have to stop the moon from falling. But is there a point in that game where you were like, oh my God?
So there's kind of a few times, really. So the thing of it is, it's more than a spiritual successor. It's actually one of the few direct sequels in the Zelda franchise. And actually, it begins with your partner character, Navi, who is she's your encyclopedia of knowledge from Ocarina of Time.
She's like a fairy or something, isn't she?
Yeah, Navi the fairy.
Like a glowing light with wings. Yeah.
Hey, listen.
Hello.
Yeah. So the whole thing is she's been with you the whole way through Ocarina of Time. She gives you enemy weaknesses. She kind of helps narrate certain things in the story because Link is the silent protagonist. We talked about that before. And as a result of that, she's essentially a part of your journey. She is a part of your journey from beginning to end in Ocarina of Time. And she leaves at the end of the story. Just flies off. And Majora's Mask picks up directly after that with Link looking to find her again. Now, a lot of Majora's Mask kind of sidelines that idea. Navi kind of doesn't really matter for the remainder of the plot. But a big part of the game is actually getting to know the characters in the world.
In Clocktown?
Not just Clocktown, in the 4 regions surrounding Clocktown as well.
Okay.
And how they interact with that world, which is why it's kind of so engaging. Because as you said, you're on the 3-day cycle. You can reset the 3-day cycle anytime you want once you get your ocarina back. You learn the Song of Time, and then time travel happens. So some of the stories are dependent on the time, on what day it is and what time of the day it is as you play through the game. So characters will be in certain locations doing certain activities.
Oh, okay. I get you. Okay.
For example, there's a bar in Clocktown. Now, as a kid, you're not allowed in the bar. It's a bar. It's for adults. One of the masks, you can get a mask that turns you into an adult, so you can go in there.
Oh,
And if you go in with each of the masks, sorry, I think you can go in during the day as a kid, but at night you can't.
Mm.
So if you go in there with each of the masks and play an instrument, because your instrument changes depending on which of the masks you're wearing, or the main masks.
Oh, so you don't just have an ocarina, you might have like a hand harp or a kalimba or something like this?
So yeah, if you're Link, you have the ocarina. If you're Deku Link, which is Plant Link, he has like a trumpet or like a series of trumpets.
Oh, okay.
If you're Goron Link, which is the big burly rock monster, he has like the bongo drums. If you're Zora Link, which is a fish man, he has a guitar made from a giant fish's ribcage.
Oh yeah, I get that. Yeah,
metal as fuck. So if you go in and you play instruments as all four of these, if I remember correctly, you'll do a little performance with all four of them. And on the last day, if you talk to him, the bartender, he'll say he's so glad that you're here at the end because you're his favorite customer.
Oh no!
And that's if you put the time in yourself, to get all the masks, go back and visit him. All the day, all that kind of stuff. I might be getting some details wrong here because it's been a little while since I played it. But
yeah, of course,
it is that feeling of you connected with this ball of code, ball of polygons. This was the N64. They were ugly as shit.
They were very blocky, weren't they? They were very blocky.
And he just says that little thing to you. He's like, you know what? I'm glad you're here at the end. You're my favorite customer. You're like, God damn.
Yeah, damn.
And there's other stuff like that as well throughout. Part of the game's main plot is that you purge certain characters who are near death or on their deathbed or already dead. And kind of allow them to drift off into the afterlife. Wow. So there's a lot of death in the game. It's quite grim at times, and it really shows a darker side to the franchise that hasn't really been revisited since.
It's very mature.
Quite, considering it was an N64 game at a time when Nintendo was still kind of leaning into their kiddie aesthetic. Nowadays,
with like Super Mario and
like exactly. The big games on the N64 were Super Mario 64, Diddy Kong Racing, Mario Kart, Donkey Kong 64. You had a few other kind of more adult-oriented titles like Shadow Man and Project Zero. Not Project Zero. Maybe it was Project Zero. Others, obviously, the Golden Eye would be a big one. But generally speaking, Nintendo was still kind of seen as for kids. And that's fine. That's fine. And Zelda as well. Zelda is a family-friendly franchise. It always has been. Majora's Mask just took it that bit further. I may have described this before. There's a scene in the game where there's this... Is
it the man and the woman?
Oh no! I remember talking about that before with the key, with them, the wedding.
That's it. They were, yeah.
He's
so
trapped
like the
in
inn holder. So that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. I know this is another one where, I think I've talked about this before, but you go to this canyon near the kind of tail end of the game, and there's this music house. So it's kind of like a house in the middle of a canyon surrounded by gibdos or kind of mummies, and you can go into the house. You have to try and get into the house. I can't remember the exact details of getting in. But essentially, there's a little girl that you have to get out to kind of sneak in. Once you go in, there's a man there who's like half Gibdo. He's quite like grotesque or whatever. And you play the Song of Healing, which is the thing you use to kind of send off spirits or fix them or whatever.
Kind of like Yuna's prayer from Final Fantasy X.
Exactly.
Like a summoning, like ascending almost.
Yeah.
Sending into the next passage.
Yeah. It's like a ritual nearly. But it also heals people.
And it's
in the name.
Now, just going on that though and again, I'm feigning ignorance here, okay? And I can hear people sharpening their pitchforks, being like, "You never played Zelda before?" Is Link the only person who can perform these kind of spells, or is there other people? I know it's like a singular journey, but you never get another person in your party though, do you?
No. It's very much like an action adventure story.
So it's purely Link doing this.
It's not like an RPG where you build a team and you go about your business. It's an action adventure game,
right?
And very much the focus is on you're a kid on an adventure. That's fine. It works for what it is. But yeah, so you perform the Song of Healing on this man who's half Gibdo mummy man, half
he's
person.
Dying basically.
He's kind of like he's trapped in limbo. And you perform the Song of Healing, and the Gibdo mask falls off with this little clatter on the ground. I think just before, sorry, my storytelling needs some
No, no,
work.
no. Again, I am throwing you under the spot here, so memories are going to be faded.
I remember you go into the basement of the house, and he busts out of like a wardrobe, and he kind of comes at you, and you're like, "Shit, I'm trapped in the basement with the Gibdo." And his daughter, his little girl, only a few years old, runs in and gets between you and him, and she's like, "Leave my daddy alone," even though he's a monster. And you perform the song of healing, and his mask falls off and he's back to normal. And there's this moment where they reunite, and you realize this girl has been holding up in this valley of monsters and the undead to protect her sick, mutated father, who didn't even recognize her. At the end of the world. That shit sticks with you. Now, again, like I may have mucked up some details, but it's the theme and the emotion, because it is so well framed. It's all text. It's not even voice acted. It's crappy looking polygons on the N64, but it's the writing, the music, not just not the visuals, but the presentation of the visuals. When you perform the song, the shot is like of the guy's feet, and then the mask hits the ground, and that's when it's simple framing, but it works so fucking well, and it just resonates with you on a deep personal level, which is why it stuck with me as well as it did. It's why, like, even now I go back to it, I'm a bit of an emotional wreck. There's a guy you can find. You can only find him when you're using a thing called the Lens of Truth, which reveals invisible stuff.
Oh, okay. Kind of like if I could kind of compare it to something, it almost reminds me of like the Detective Vision and the Arkham games. Essentially,
yeah. And you go to this place and you have it on. You may not even realize to have it equipped at this point. Other parts of the game might highlight, you should probably use the Lens of Truth there.
Gives you a prompt or something like this.
Yeah, like there might be symbols on the wall that kind of signify, this is the place where you would use the Lens of Truth. But this area is just outdoors in the wild, and you notice like a circle of stones. You don't think about it normally. Like, you think it's just a circle of stones. Maybe I'll run over, I'll pick up a stone, I'll throw it. But if you think, maybe there's something more to this, you put on the Lens of Truth, and there's a guy sitting there in the circle of stones, wounded.
Wow.
And he's like, I've been here calling for help for days, and nobody's come to get me. And you realize it's because of the mask that he's wearing. The mask essentially turns him invisible.
Oh.
And you can get this mask, which allows you to sneak past enemies later in the game. Now, it's quite a clever idea, is that if you come early in the game and get this mask, you can use it to essentially skip a stealth section at another part of the game.
Right.
Because you're invisible.
Mm-hmm. But you probably wouldn't have got that mask until you experienced this moment.
Exactly. Well, that's it, because it's an optional moment. You don't have...
It's completely optional.
Completely optional. You don't need this mask. It's just world building. But it's also, it encourages exploration, because if you went... Because the region you find him in is the end game.
Okay.
But you can go there from early on just to go do a bit of exploration before you're able to go even further. If you do that, once you've acquired the Lens of Truth, you get a new mask, which helps you in other parts of the game later on.
I get you. Okay. It kind of harkens back to that Metroidvania type of gameplay, doesn't it?
Kind of, yeah, because it's almost like a sequence break.
Yes.
Because there's a section in the kind of third region, the watery region, where you have to break into a pirate stronghold and sneak through the pirates to rescue a bunch of tadpoles for the Zoras, the fish people. They're right. Big tadpoles. They grow into human-sized fish. But you can do it much more easily if you get this mask, because you can just walk on through.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a narrative payoff; it's a gameplay payoff as well.
Yeah, and yet it's funny though. Like when you try to explain that to somebody who's probably never played this, like I've never played a Zelda game, and I'm getting fucking like whoa when you're talking to me about this, just because you and I kind of speak the same language when we're talking about our love for video games and things like this. You see. If you're going to describe that to somebody who never picked up a controller in their life, they'd be like, it's just a fucking game. Like, what's... Yeah. But it's like, it's trying to explain. It's like, no, you don't get it. It's how the world you are experiencing, like, life is moving around you. events are going on around you, but you are a catalyst in these events as well. And it's really difficult for other mediums to capture that. Like a good example of that is if you, okay, I'm gonna kind of throw it out there. So for me, one of the greatest movies that I've ever seen, it's only a recent one as a matter of fact, was The Batman, Robert Pattinson as the Batman. And I remember saying that to me, that portrayal of Bruce Wayne, maybe not, well, in a sense, Bruce Wayne, but maybe more so the Batman. It's the character of Batman. That to me is my definitive Batman in terms of movie portrayals. Kevin Conroy for me is the is the voice of Batman for me. But you could be describing what you loved about it, and then somebody else would just say, "Yeah, I didn't get it. He's too broody. I didn't get it because it's too long. I didn't get it because of X, Y, and Z." And it's hard to kind of describe it. But when you're talking about a video game to somebody who's never played a video game, you're trying to like explain it, but like all you're getting is like a blank face. And it's like, no, but you're not listening to what I'm saying. Oh no, I'm listening to what you're saying. I just don't get it. At the end of the day, it's just a game, but it's how the player interacts with it. It's how the player kind of invests so much time into the characters, into the story, into the narrative. And it's such a hard thing to explain, though. It really is. It really, really is.
Well, another one that kind of, it goes in a slightly different direction because in and of itself, it's a kind of commentary on the whole, it's just a game, is Spec Ops: The Line.
Oh, now, Jesus.
A lot of people online have already talked about this, and rightly so, because it deserves to be looked at. I remember, so it starts off fairly run-of-the-mill.
Third-person shooter.
Yeah, third-person military shooter.
I have never played that game.
Oh.
I have never played that, and I actually remember there was a conversation that you and I had when we were in college together, and I think it was one of those times when we were just in the canteen, just we were having a cup of coffee or we were waiting for our next lecture or something like this, and we were talking about games in general, and I think this was when Mass Effect 3 had just come out, so it was a very exciting time to be kind of having a chat about video games, and you said, dude, Spec Ops: The Line, like, have you heard of it? Like, have you played it? And I was like, no, not really. And the way you described it to me, though, like in the sense, like it's just a standard third-person Spec Ops. You know, there's nothing really, I suppose, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, there's nothing really kind of pulling me in towards the story, except you've got go to A to B to B to C. But I know what you're hinting at, but I'm going to hand the microphone over to you.
Well, that's the thing. It is on the surface, and it advertised itself as much as a run-of-the-mill military shooter, because part of the game's appeal is the fact that you don't know what's going to happen. Like, you might think it's just a third-person Call of Duty game, and to start off, you wouldn't be wrong. But little tidbits throughout the game kind of reveal that maybe there's more going on in this region. I think it's in a destroyed Dubai.
Yeah, so it's there's from what I've seen. Sorry to cut across you, Shepherd. From what I've seen, it looks like almost like a sandstorm has ravaged the place, and it's war torn, and you can't really get full exploration of this place because there's certain points that are closed off, and there's rubble blocking you and things like this.
It's quite linear, in that respect. It is very much like you go through these corridors to reach the end of the game. And then after a while, there's a moment where you as a video gamer, a lot of gamers, when they play this game, they're conditioned to think that by default they're the good guys.
Yes,
because that's just how a lot of games have framed it, particularly military shooters. Like, you're a member of the military, therefore you're the good guy. End of story. You can't do anything wrong. And then there's a part where you've kind of cleared out this enormous courtyard, and I think you get like satellite footage of what's ahead of you, and you see all these bodies.
It's a night vision with the blinking kind of lights on these white people or silhouettes kind of dotted about the place. Yeah,
and you're like, oh man, like the amount of them ahead of us is crazy. But you discover, oh wait, they have like napalm mortars. We can use them to take out the enemy in advance.
White phosphorus, I think it was, wasn't it?
That's it, white phosphorus, yeah.
Yeah.
So you use it without a second thought because it's a video game. That's what you do. And then you walk through the remains of what you've done. And it's innocent civilians huddled together who were afraid from all the gunfire. They were hiding out away from all the violence. And you just killed them.
Yeah.
Go you.
I think it's that moment when you're walking through with your squad and you see it's actually like a refugee camp or something like that. And
exactly.
These people are running away from the carnage and the chaos that you as the character are doing.
Yeah.
And it's that moment when the camera pans down and it looks like to be like a mother kind of cradling her child to stop the bright lights coming towards them.
Her flesh is burned off. It's horrific.
Part of her skull is revealed and she's just like a melted statue almost, like cradling this child. And behind you hear your squad mates arguing about this.
Yeah, they're like, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But it goes one further later on. I think after a helicopter crash, you're separated from one of your crew and you hear him in trouble. So this is much later in the game. You hear him in trouble and he's like, oh, get the fuck away from me. And you're like, oh, shit. And you're kind of surrounded by the locals. And you think that they're going to try and kill you. So I shot them.
Mm.
Now, I went into work the next day after that happened in the game, and I was chatting to one of the guys. I was like, oh man, I just had that part of the game. And he's like, oh, what did you do? I'm like, what do you mean, what did I do? I shot them. And he's like, why didn't you shoot in the air? I'm like, what? It's like, if you just shoot in the air, it'll scare them off.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh, I killed them.
Yeah.
And that's
yeah.
powerful. Again, like, they're not real people.
Yeah.
They're code.
Uh-huh.
But the world and the characters and the writing and all of it and the gameplay is a big part of this because I did that.
Mm-hmm.
I made the wrong call because of how I was conditioned to play video games.
Mm-hmm.
And I pulled the trigger at the end of the day, which is the important thing here. You can't do that in a book. You can't do that in a show or a movie. And not like they all, every other medium of entertainment has its merits. But a video game being interactive is why I think some moments can hit harder. Like something like that. Like you can be watching a TV series and you think you know the character in question, and then they do something horrific, or it's revealed they've already done something, and you're like, "Oh my god, what the hell?" But when you're the person that does that, it's like, "Oh shit, I'm the bad guy here, not the character on screen. That was me."
Yeah, it was like you were the one who was like in control of that situation.
Yeah, why
that
didn't
was down
I think
to you? Why didn't Why didn't I just shoot in the air? Someone else thought to. I didn't. Yeah. But doesn't then it kind of it opens up the dialogue down to like primal kind of instincts? Like if you were in that situation, what would you do?
But that's it, because the scene is framed in such a way that you feel like you're in peril. Your friend is in danger. You can hear him over the again. It's been a while since I played it, so my details might be a bit fuzzy here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not talking to you, Joker, by the way, because I know you haven't played. I'm talking about the people online. So, it's framed in such a way that you feel like my character is in danger, and if I don't do something, it's a game over, and I'm gonna have to start again. Or my colleague, my partner is gonna die, or he's gonna be horribly murdered. I'm like, oh god, I gotta go get him. So I acted, and I acted poorly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's great. It's great that I could do that. It gave the game, without having a menu or without having, again, I love Mass Effect, I love Telltale's Walking Dead, but the game didn't advertise to me that there was a choice to be made, which makes the choice even more impactful.
It hits harder, yeah.
Yeah, because it wasn't like, oh, is it Paragon or Renegade? It's, no, I just made a bad call.
Yeah, I think
is powerful.
Going back onto the whole Paragon and Renegade kind of thing, and I mean this with the greatest respect, as much as I love Mass Effect, right?
Yeah.
And you were the one who got me into Mass Effect, I must say. What bothers me about Mass Effect's choice and consequence system is it's very much in your face, in the sense, in the sense of if you're talking to like take Shephard going against Saren, for example. And when Saren talks, immediately this little flash might come up to say, hit this button to do the Renegade option, or hit this button to do the Paragon option, and then it would lead to more dialogue options and things like this. It just feels like, for a game like Spec Ops, to give you as the player the freedom to do whatever you want, but it rewards you for thinking about your options and your choices.
Yeah.
Not that many games do that, though.
Well, see, that's the thing. There's only a couple of moments like that in Spec Ops. But I think as well as is the fact that it is framed like any other generic military shooter. So you fall into the rhythms of the games you've played before, not thinking about the fact that you are being given choices. You're just not paying close enough attention to realize they're there. Now, again, Mass Effect is one of my favorite franchises of all time. Mass Effect 2 is a contender for my favorite game of all time.
I'd be inclined to agree with you. Not even as a sequel, but I think
as a game,
as a standalone title, it ticks all the boxes.
Agreed. And I do like the RPG dialogue choices. I think the dialogue wheel, it's a nice streamlined way to do it. However, it's kind of broken, because if you top right is Paragon, middle is neutral, bottom right is Renegade every single time. Left is just more information.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
So if you know I'm doing a Paragon playthrough, every single time just top right, just hold the stick. You're not even paying attention to what the choice is. Except if, of course, if you want to get some more information, you investigate. You ask.
There's no diversity, I think.
No, and it's fine. I think it does it well. It does what it sets out to do. But then it's just games like Spec Ops, which once in a lifetime. It's not a franchise. It didn't need to be a franchise. I'm glad it's not. And it's more of a cult hit than, like, it wasn't a huge sales thing when it came out. It's more kind of talked about after the fact.
It kind of slipped under the radar, and I think, like, I remember when The Last of Us Part 2 came out, that Spec Ops: The Line was brought into the dialogue about the choice and consequence. Are you doing the right thing? You know, are you doing what is a justifiable thing for the protagonist? And it makes you question what the protagonist is doing. Because I know in The Last of Us Part 2, you're playing as both Ellie and Abby. And it's kind of like, are they doing the right thing? Like where's the division between good and evil? It's very fine. I think Spec Ops does that really, really well. But that game has been talked about so many times, and it's I haven't heard of another title that does that game so well, though.
Neither have I.
It's a bizarre one in and of itself. It just kind of came out of nowhere, you know?
Like, other games kind of arguably have similar maybe attempts at something like that, or have concepts that kind of line up with it. But I think Spec Ops, because it sold itself as military shooter, generic military shooter, and then subverted the expectation. Now, I'm not subverting expectations isn't the only way to do things. It's you have to subvert them with a good intention, not just for the sake of subverting them. But Spec Ops had to be a military shooter for its point to be made. Is, we are conditioned. We are buying into these products first and these experiences second.
That could be said about Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, though, couldn't it?
Oh, very much so. That was more overt because Kojima, he's very, on the nose with a lot of his stuff in a good way, again, because a big part of MGS2's message is, not trusting everything you see online. The digital sphere is shaped a certain way, and we are easily manipulated by that. Obviously, a big part of that was the marketing for Metal Gear Solid 2 was it's all Solid Snake, and then the game comes out and you're like, nah, fuck you, it's Raiden.
But he wouldn't have got that away. He wouldn't have gotten away with that, like if it was a movie or a TV series. He would have only gotten away with that as a video game.
More than likely, yeah. Which is interesting because Kojima is such a self-professed fan of film.
Yeah.
Which I find very interesting. Yeah, I don't know of any movies or TV shows that have even attempted something like that.
Not to the extent that video games do, though.
No.
Because it's very, very, very difficult to trick an audience. And there's a few movies that do that really, really well without going into the whole cliche thing of, oh, it was me all along. Memento, Christopher Nolan, is a great example of that.
Oh, yeah. Thoroughly enjoy that film.
Yeah, that's a great example. To an extent, Shutter Island, you could kind of look at that. Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
It was Martin Scorsese, yeah.
Yeah, Scorsese, yeah.
So you need to have like a really clever team of writers behind you to do that in like a TV series or a movie series. It's next to impossible to do that outside of the video game narrative. But one for me, when just even talking about, oh, it's just a game, why are you getting so upset? It's like, you're not getting it though. You're not getting it. It's really, really difficult to describe that to somebody who isn't in our scene. You know what I mean? Like one for me was, it's a game that I'm playing right now at the moment, is the remake of Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII. And I booted it up today, and I remember texting you saying, I'm only on the loading screen right now, and already this is bothering me. Because I haven't played the original game in 5 years.
Yeah, that's probably because I have it. Well, I have your copy.
See, the thing is, though, even though if you didn't have it, I probably still wouldn't play it. Because I've done it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fact that I was seeing it on like a more remade, grander scale, just like it was like, oh, Jesus, it's like I was experiencing everything all over again. And there's a certain piece of music that plays on the title screen that plays at the end of the game. I was like, oh God, there it is. I forgot about that completely. You know?
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, yeah. But the other question that I had for you is, like, is there one specific game where you're like, I've played it once, it hit me that bad, I don't want to do that again?
That's a very tough question.
Yeah. But it's just a game, though.
Yeah, it is. It is just a game.
Yeah.
But
it is tough. And
yeah,
it is tough. I mean, because there's hundreds of games that kind of jump to my mind, and I don't know if it's like masochistic on my behalf, but like one of the games that I remember completing as a kid, I was probably 10 or 11, and that was Final Fantasy X. And it's that moment at the end when Tidus realizes he's part of the Aeon's dream, and as Yuna is sending the Aeons to the far plane to eternal rest, like Spirit is going to be saved, and Tidus looks at his hands and they start fading, and Yuna stops doing her sending because she doesn't want him to disappear. Like, she knows now, like, that he's not of this world. And Tidus says to her, Yuna, I have to go. And she's like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And as he walks past her to jump off the airship to fade away into the sky. But as he walks past her, she runs to him and falls through him. And it's like, oh my God, like, stop. Like, because their relationship had really been built from the start of the game, essentially. But then you progress with these characters, this man who isn't from this world, and he's trying to protect the woman that he loves. The woman that he loves knows at some stage he's not real. Like, he's a figment almost.
Yeah. And
it's that moment when he wraps his arms around her from behind her as he's hugging her, like he puts his hands across her chest in an X. And as he's fading, he walks through her. And even to this day, it's like, how the fuck did I get through that the first time, let alone play it the 27th time, you know?
Yeah, I get you.
You know, it's really, really tricky. But is there one for you that you're like, I've played that once, I don't want to do that again, you know?
I think on a smaller scale than that, and weirdly enough, it's kind of the inverse of your thing as well. And it's another Legend of Zelda game. I'm sorry to be so hung up on Zelda.
No, not at all. This is news. This is news for me. So,
okay. So for some context, anyway, around the time of the Game Boy, on the Game Boy Color.
Oh, I had one of those.
Yeah, Game Boy Color.
I had Pokemon Yellow for the Game Boy Color.
Right, you did.
Yeah, that's the only Pokemon game I've ever played. And
it's the best. No, it's not the best. Soul Silver is my favorite. Yeah, Pokemon Yellow. I love that shit. So on my Game Boy Color, I had a game, the Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening DX or Deluxe.
Okay.
It was essentially just a high res quotation marks
quote unquote
port of the original Game Boy version of Link's Awakening. So had color and shit.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, and Link's Awakening was a fairly quirky Zelda game for the time it came out. You know, Link wakes up. Every Link is technically different. It's not the same. It's kind of like this idea of reincarnation and stuff through time.
Mm.
So Link's Awakening starts with Link waking up on. He's on a ship, and the ship crashes, and he wakes up on an island. And this young girl, Marin, finds him, nurses him back to health. And then you have to go through like a series of kind of weird adventure-y shit. It's good fun. And at the end of the game, you find out that the island itself has been a dream. And all of its inhabitants, who you've gotten to know and help throughout the adventure, have also been a dream.
Mm.
And now the dream is over.
Mm.
So once you wake up, they're all gone.
Yeah. Jesus.
And now they actually remade that on the Switch a couple of years back with a toy box kind of aesthetic.
Mm.
I didn't pick it up because it's like, nope, I've been there. I've felt those feelings.
Mm.
I don't want to feel them again.
But was it like that, like when you realized that like they're going to vanish, that was when you said, no, that's it?
Yeah, you see, even then I had played through it a couple of times as a kid.
Yeah.
But it's now looking back and realizing the kind of the story and the feelings it kind of evoked in me.
Mm.
Because I'm something of a dreamer. Maybe not a dreamer, but when I was younger, in particular, growing up and stuff like that, I often made up people in my head to talk to. Even
really,
yeah, and even like late into my adult years and stuff like that, it was still something I kind of did.
Mm.
Probably unhealthy, but it was just I had kind of grown up fantasizing a lot and kind of imagining scenarios or conversations in my head that would never happen.
Mm.
So I think looking back on it with that in mind, it had that kind of extra oomph to it. It's like, oh yeah, no, I've dealt with that kind of feeling on a day-to-day basis where this isn't real. Right. And I think that feeds into it's just a game. It's like, okay, well, to Link, it was just a dream.
Yeah. To you, it was just a game, though.
And to me, it was just a game, but it's a game that spoke to me on a personal level because it had characters I cared about. And again, it was an 8-bit fucking Game Boy game. It wasn't enormous production, decent production value for the time.
Mm.
But there wasn't a lot of color. The music was good, but fairly simple.
Mm.
The effects would eat your ear hole out. And it was all like written, like text dialogue. There was no voice acting or anything like that. But it stuck with me.
Mm.
And it's kind of like, cool. I dig you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that's I've played it, I've experienced the feelings, and it's something I still occasionally even experience now, where sometimes I just find myself, if I'm alone for a considerable amount of time, or if I'm on the bus and a piece of music from my past comes on, I kind of drift into that old mindset of imagining a conversation or a scenario that isn't real. I
get you.
So
I get you.
Yeah.
I get that. I do get that. I know what you mean. And a lot of the time it's a bizarre one to think about, because as you drift into these places after listening to these like pieces of music, it's for you and you only. And I think that's the main thing of the topic. The last thing I want to know is, like, I know we're going to be wrapping this up pretty shortly. Like the whole title of it, but it's just a game. It's like, yeah, but you don't get it. Like, you have to experience it for yourself. The last kind of question I want to ask you is, if there was a game from any title, any franchise, any console, if there was a game you could experience once, all over again, without any knowledge about what happens, what would it be?
Ooh. That is big. That's a very good question, just because there's so many games that I would probably consider.
Yeah.
You know,
well, throw a few out and see what happens.
Okay. Well, for sure, I would think I would go back to season 1 of Telltale's Walking Dead, which by extension would include the later seasons because, you know, spoilers. I would love to experience Lee and Clementine's whole journey again. because it resonated with me so much.
Yeah.
And I think that's an example of it will always resonate with me, no matter if I played it for the first time now or 10 years ago. It's something that will kind of stick with me.
Right.
Probably.
So you're saying up there is Telltale's The Walking Dead season 1. That's one of them anyway.
That's one of them, definitely.
That's a good one. Are you specifically only talking about season 1, or are you talking about?
I don't need to play the other seasons. Yeah, I don't need to play seasons 2 to 4.
Yeah,
as much as I enjoy them, they have their own strengths and weaknesses. But specifically, season 1 and just Lee and Clementine's contained story. That's all I need to experience again.
Season 1,
if I had to.
Yeah.
Another one would probably be if I could experience the first Legend of Zelda. There's a lot of Legend of Zelda on this. If I could experience the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the first time again. Now, it's not the best Zelda game. It doesn't even hold up particularly well. I'll die on that hill. Fight me. But it has a special place in my heart because it was the first adventure game I played. It was the first one where I felt like, man, this is the end of the world, or this is the adventure, and I'm the underdog hero kid who has to save everyone. And the progression of the game's fairly basic story just kind of struck a chord with me.
In comparison to Majora's Mask?
Yeah, see, they're similar but different. Ocarina of Time is a fairly straightforward adventure game where you move dungeon to dungeon with the odd maybe side quest bit in between. Majora's Mask is very much about getting to know the world that you're in and potentially mourning its loss because you're the only thing between it and total destruction. Right. Knowing that with Ocarina of Time, there's nothing to stop you just fucking about, doing side quests or mini games, or there's no sense of impending doom. There are elements of, the bad guy's doing some bad stuff, and it works very well. I think there is a sense of dread at times. But Majora's Mask is much more focused on these people are at the end of their time limit. And you're seeing how they react to that. You're trying to console them, you're trying to fix their problems, you're trying to get to know them. But everything has that timer hanging over it. Which is why they're so good. They're great, but they're different. Okay. So I would probably, for the sake of a first time, because the first time with Majora's Mask can be quite disorienting. You're kind of like, oh my God, what is going on?
Yeah, what do I do? Where do I go?
Yeah, you don't know how to prioritize yet. Whereas the first time with Ocarina of Time is this feeling that you're setting out on a grand adventure.
Right.
Which I love.
Okay.
And again, not even my favorite Zelda, but one of my favorite first experiences with a game. And then if I had another one...
Of course. You do?
Ooh. This is tough. I would probably... goddamn. Probably Tales of Symphonia. I've talked to you about that before.
You have.
A lot. Especially recently with the
new one is coming out, isn't it? The remaster,
the remaster of Tales of Symphonia. I have the web page on GameStop open. I'm going to pre-order the collector's edition. And I don't pre-order. I don't get collector's editions anymore, but this game has a very special place in my heart. I remember years ago, a couple of friends and I, because it is cooperative, you can play local co-op throughout the entire game.
Oh.
Which is nifty.
Cool.
Imagine basically like if you and I could play Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I could play as like Barrett and you could play as Cloud, and we could do it together.
Man, I'm Tifa all the way, man.
Oh, Tifa's so fucking good.
Man, I'm Tifa all the way.
I was trying to lead you towards taking Cloud so I could switch to Tifa sneakily. But Tales of Symphonia...
The bizarre thing, though, is that like Cloud isn't even my favourite Final Fantasy character.
Oh.
I never liked him. I never liked him.
Douchey.
He kind of played the whole thing of like, am I really me? Is this the path that has been led to me? It was kind of like, oh, for fuck's sake. And it was only like in later years when I realised that he was like, oh, dude, shut the fuck up and get on with it, will you? But no, okay. So Tales of Symphonia. So
Tales of Symphonia, as I said, it's you can play cooperatively. You don't have to. And I remember, again, this is, it is just a game, but it was also an experience, and it was something that brought me and my friends closer together at the time. So two guys I used to hang around with. We went over to my friend's house. We put on Tales of Symphonia. We're like, we're going to play through the entire game in one sitting as a team.
How long did that take?
We didn't finish, but we had gone for, I think, about 18 hours, 19 hours.
What?
Yeah, well, the game, like, if you're just doing the main story, you're looking at about a 30, 35 hour
Easily.
game at a push. But if you're doing all of the side stuff, 80 hours probably.
Jesus.
And I actually said that on the box. I remember distinctly said, it was like, oh, an 80-hour adventure. It's like, it's 80 hours if you're taking your time. But even still, it's I love the characters. My boy Genus Sage, the 12-year-old wizard elf man boy, he was the character I would always play because I loved his spells. I loved everything. Just I like that idea of kind of playing from a distance, and kind of picking people off from afar.
Yeah. Almost like an archer.
Yeah, exactly. There's no real archer class in the game. It's either you're up front beating the shit out of people, or you're pulling back doing spells and shit. And that's that's cool. That's fine. But that's a game that's quite near and dear to my heart. And the characters in it, just Lloyd and his unending optimism, Colette and her inability to back down, Genus and his kind of whip smart attitude of mildly racist towards humans. Kratos, whatever. I can't remember how you pronounce his name in Symphonia, voiced by the legendary Cam Clark.
Brother. Even then, like, there's so many great voice actors in that title alone. Like, my goodness,
it's phenomenal. And not the whole game isn't necessarily voice acted, but the key moments are, and that's enough.
Yes.
And you again, you care about these characters who are off on a grand adventure. If I could experience that for the first time again, I absolutely would, because I care so much about those characters and the trials and tribulations that they go through. Lloyd really has to learn that he can't do everything. He's not some perfect hero who can protect his friends all the time. He has to realize that he makes mistakes. He's not strong enough all the time. Colette has to realize that her actions affect the people around her. She's self-sacrificing. She's willing to die, but how does that affect the people that care about her? And they're complex enough characters that by the end, they're not necessarily the same as at the beginning. But while they still kind of maintain their core appeal, which is difficult to do. It's when you're spending that much time with characters, you can't just have them be exactly the same throughout the entire adventure, because you're kind of like, I don't care about you. You're just like, if I was playing something like, if The Legend of Zelda was 70, 80 hours long, I would run my head through a wall rather than playing as Link for that long. Because Link isn't a character. He's an avatar for the player. Now, some versions of Link have had character. The Wind Waker Link is much more, he reacts to things that are happening around him. Like, great, more of that, please. I love that shit.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, he's just dorky little elf boy.
He's an avatar for the player, like. Yeah.
So what about you? Your question flipped.
Damn, I didn't expect that Uno card to be reversed on me. There's a few. Like, I cast my mind back and I think I would love to play Dark Souls again for the first time. I'd love to play.
Hell yes.
I'd love to play Hollow Knight again for the first time, because it took me 4 attempts to play that game.
4?
Yeah. It took me a long time to get into Hollow Knight, because I don't know what it is. I think I might have an allergic reaction to Castlevania games or Metroidvania games, that kind of style. It bothers me when, like, I know we talked about this with the other podcast that we did, where, like, BioShock is an example. You have to go here to go here to go down here to get this key that opens this key, but you don't have that key to open that door, so you need this plasma to open down here. I am not the biggest fan of Metroidvania games. I'm really not. And I'm one of those gamers where it's like, I like to know where I'm going. If I can go off the beaten track here, I will. But this 90-degree angle shit, it bothers me, like, because I get pulled away from what I'm supposed to do. It's not to say that Metroidvania games are in and of itself like a bad thing, don't get me wrong, like, but for me, I like to know where I'm going, what the end process is. If there's a beaten track off here that I can go down to, happy days. But I think, I did not expect that question to be reversed. I think a game that I would love to play again the first time would be Persona 5 Royal.
I'm not even surprised.
Yeah, for me it was.
So here's a question before you go on. You played Persona 5 Royal after playing Persona 5.
Yes.
So would you like to completely erase Persona 5 and then play Royal from the beginning with no previous knowledge?
Damn, you're really throwing that one out to me, aren't you? Well, see, Persona 5 for me was like, it was fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I played it at a time when I myself was going through like a pretty bad breakup. And this is like my security blanket. And it kind of shielded me and gave me something to focus on. Persona 5 kind of sucks, though.
It was more at the right time for you.
Yeah. In the sense of like, you could go anywhere on this map of Shibuya. You could go here, 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 and here, and here, and it could be like pretty daunting. With Persona 5 Royal, though, it felt like everything was kind of, you're still given like full access to the whole world. But if you want to go here, this is where these people are. If you want to go here, this is where these people are. With Persona 5, it felt like you had to find them by yourself and you're kind of wasting time. And because time management is a big thing in that game, you know? With Persona 5 Royal, though, it felt like it had the right amount of turn-based combat. It had the right amount of persona for me to use. It had the right amount of characters. And I suppose I'm biased, though, because like when I played Royal, I was going through like severe laryngitis, and this was like a few years back, like only 4 years ago. So I was bedridden playing this fucking thing. And what drew me towards that, though, was like, I know I've played this before and I've bought I've bought Royal, but I will gladly play through that again just to like get the extra content. And the extra content was like 80 or so hours on top of that. Like, it is amazing the amount of things they included in that game. It is astonishing.
It's a very Japanese thing, though, isn't it? Like, Persona 4 came out and then Persona 4 Golden. Same principle. They added an epilogue chapter. They added new social links or confidants, as you may know them. They added new enemies, new personas. It's an enhanced version with extra content sprinkled throughout.
It kind of
Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like Kingdom the final mix.
Yeah. They've often done that, and now Kingdom Hearts did it, and Persona 4 did it before DLC was really a thing. I know Persona 4 Golden came out on the Vita, but Persona 3 did it twice. There was Persona 3, then Persona 3 Fez, and then Persona 3 Portable.
That's it. I know tomorrow, like, they're both going to be released. Like,
Persona 4 Golden and Persona 3 Portable, not Fez.
Yes.
Are being re-released on modern platforms, and I'm going to buy the shit out of them.
They look amazing, and it's incredible, like, that there's still like a fan base like waiting and ready just to go ahead. But like, even what you said about like the whole in Japan, like they're probably waiting for like the physical releases just to have them like in copies and have them as collector items and things like this, you see. But Persona 5 Royal would be the one, if I could experience it all over again without prior knowledge about what happened, this would be it. But I suppose, kind of like, to wrap up this new episode on the podcast that we're doing, and I just want to say, Shephard, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a very, very busy man, and I really, really do appreciate your time. I really love having these conversations with you, and we could talk about this for hours on end. What I want to ask you, though, the very, very last question is, what makes a memorable video game?
So that's an interesting one. For me, and actually, this will probably be my easiest to answer out of all the questions you've asked me so far.
I have asked you some very tricky ones now, in fairness, and I do apologize.
No, it's fine. I'll make you suffer later. For me, what makes a memorable video game is a game that makes me, I suppose, makes me care. Now, you could have the simplest kind of plot or setup. It doesn't need to be, you know, a JRPG where the world-ending stakes are through the roof and everybody's going to die if you're not the hero, the chosen one, yada, 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 whatever. Not singling out JRPGs for this, by the way. Zelda, and I'll do it as well. I suppose it's when I care enough about the world that I'm in and the people in that world that I want to be the hero.
Right.
Now, it's not always about being the hero. Games like Resident Evil 4, I adore that game, even though like Leon is your stereotypical B-movie action hero character. But that game made me care because it didn't take itself too seriously. The gameplay was tight. I cared about my progression through the game. And that's the thing, is making me care can mean any number of things. It can mean making me care about the world and the characters. It can make me care about the gameplay systems. It's difficult to quantify memorable. Because sometimes you don't even know a game is going to be memorable until you finished it.
Yes.
You know, I think you don't. It's hard to really nail down what makes a game memorable, or what ultimately is kind of the core element that is like, this game will forever be remembered. Because developers may not even set out to make their game some big memorable masterpiece. Like Hollow Knight, as an example, was just made by two guys, and Christopher Larkin did the music.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They didn't probably go out to reinvent the Metroidvania wheel. As a matter of fact, though, just on the subject of Metroidvanias, they had said they wanted to distance themselves from that Metroidvania subgenre title. Because at the time Hollow Knight came out, indie Metroidvanias were a dime a dozen.
Oh yeah, like Super Meat Boy and Braid and all that was going on.
Super Meat Boy is a platformer, so is Braid. I think it's more stuff like Dead Cells and Salt and Sanctuary and like these other kinds of games. Shovel Knight and things like that. Yeah, like these kinds of games where you're in this world and the world is quite large and expansive and whatever. So they were like, oh, you know, that genre is, you know, it's full to capacity because, you know, Metroidvanias were popularized in 2D. 2D assets are more affordable and easier for independent developers to kind of make in an effective way. Because they can put their own stamp on an art style without having to, you know, break the bank to make big budget 3D shit. And it means more. Like Undertale is an example of one that was made by just one guy, and that fucking broke the internet. That's not a Metroidvania, it's an RPG, but
yes, it
skyrocketed. One of the characters is in fucking Smash Bros.
Really?
Yeah, now he's not a playable character, he's a costume.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
It's still like the recognition that independent title made by one guy, and he got help from a couple of other people for some of the assets and art style and stuff like that. That's even that, right? Kind of off topic here.
No,
but
go
that's
ahead.
not something that happens as much in film and television. Now, film is slightly different. Television, it can't happen because television is dominated by networks and streaming. You can't produce a television series on a budget and then somehow have that, unless you go the YouTube route where you're like, I'll make it for YouTube.
Yes.
But that virtually never happens, at least not to my knowledge. You can self-publish a book, but the likelihood of that getting picked up by readers across the globe, not
very,
really,
very small.
Yeah, very unlikely. Video games, we have the means to do and create. I could create something right here on my laptop, and it may be the greatest thing in the world. Probably wouldn't be. Very unlikely it would be. But the tools are there for me to do that.
I have faith in you.
But that's the thing. The tools are there for me to do that. And to publish my game for other people to see. Things like, I know Kickstarter is used for film and stuff like that as well, but video games are a huge element of why Kickstarter is so popular, and vice versa. Kickstarter popularized a lot of indie games. And I think in that sense, it's very interesting because people resonate with titles like Hollow Knight and Undertale and these independently produced games on such a deep personal level. But hey, it is just a video game.
Yeah, that's it. Like, and it goes back to like the title that we were talking about. Like, what, like, it is just a video game. It's just a game.
Mm.
Um, and I think that the medium that we appreciate, like, no other medium could do that.
No.
Movies, TV series, TV shows, Netflix adaptations, Disney Plus only titles. They could never do that. They could never do that. Which is, it's amazing because like we belong into such like a niche kind of product, or a niche kind of platform, where it's like, if I describe to you, oh, do you remember that part in the Banner Saga? Do you remember that part in God of War Ragnarok? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's have a chat about it. And it's like, I think it's because we are controlling a character going through this predetermined path, but we don't know what's going to happen. With TV episodes, we can just skip ahead, get a brief summary of what happened the previous episode. And like the connection isn't there. But when you're controlling a character over the space of like 30 or 40 hours, the journey that they go through impacts the player, which is what I said at the start. It's like it's directed towards the player.
Very true. As an example, with something like God of War Ragnarok, you can just play through the story. You can go from A to B to C and complete the story. But oftentimes with video games, you have that choice of going on another path and experiencing
side
the world.
quests and
and even like with the world building and stuff, I think video games are unparalleled in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, say, if you're watching a TV series like Game of Thrones, you're like, okay, cool, I really like this world. You have to go out of your way then to find out more about this world.
Yeah.
But in a video game, you can just, I'll just wander over here and I'll read up more things. And that's obviously dependent on the game itself and how much the developers went through
care about the lore and things like this.
To fill the world with meaningful content. But it's a medium that you can do that in. Yeah. Which I love.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you. Well, listen, I'm really, really thankful and glad that we had the chance to kind of sit down and kind of like explore our thoughts or ideas on this second podcast episode of what is a video game, or what is this. It's brilliant to kind of have this open dialogue with you. So the last question I want to ask you, and I hope that we're okay for time here.
We're good. Stop asking me questions, you son of a bitch.
The last question I want to ask you is, right, this is like, and we'll call it here. The last question I want to ask you is, if you could recommend one game to somebody to experience for the first time, what would it be?
For the very first time.
The very first time.
So essentially, this is necessary. This is, if you're going to play a game, this is the game you should play.
Exactly. What would it be and why?
That is so very tough.
I have one.
What's yours?
Metal Gear Solid 1. Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation 1.
Okay. Why?
Well, the reason why I think it's vital for somebody to ever play that game is because not only are you given an introduction to cinematic openings, credits, outros, intros, FMVs, the codec screen, animation, it's absolutely stellar. Gameplay wise, like, you're not going in with like a full arsenal of weapons, like you're stripped naked. Like, you have to like resource for items, for rations, for your not for your cigarettes, so for your rations, your thermal goggles, your mine detector, higher up weapons, the key cards to open the hangar doors. Like, you are by yourself in this new surrounding, this barren wasteland that is like heavily armed, with patrols walking about the place looking for you. I just think, as a game, it's like, if I was to introduce somebody for the first time who has never played a video game, Metal Gear Solid, because you have to rely on your support network, and your support network may not have the best intentions for you. And I just think, because of the dialogue itself and how fluid the conversations are between yourself and your support network, with Snake talking to Campbell or Snake talking to Master Miller, it's just, for me, even on the console itself, the PlayStation 1 is such a massively popular console. Like, I think it's the perfect example of, it meets with action to stealth stealth to lore, from lore to weapons knowledge, from weapons knowledge to bosses. It's just, to me, it's like if somebody said to me, I've never played a video game ever before. You want to play it? There you go. There you go. The flip side of that, though, is, and again, I might be a little bit biased about this, would be Soul Reaver, the Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver.
Ooh, daddy.
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's a toss between those two, because with Soul Reaver, you have not only Simon Templeman and Michael Bell as two of the greatest voice actors ever to grace our screens, but you have heavy action, somewhat RPG moments, but the lore is beautiful. The dialogue is almost perfect. For me, it's a cross between Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, and Metal Gear Solid 1. No, hang on. Yeah, Metal Gear Solid. Yeah, so it's a cross between those two. And ironically, they're both for the PlayStation 1. So, yeah, that would be my one anyway, my 1/2.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
Oh, right. Well, I've managed to stall for time, so now I've thought of one. So again, I actually have two that I think are good. I think the first one would probably be Telltale's Walking Dead Season 1.
Okay.
Because the story, the gameplay is quite light, so it's a bit more accessible if you've never picked up a controller before.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, you can actually play it on your phone these days.
Yes.
So it's quite accessible in that respect, which I think is good and important. So I think definitely I would lean towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And just to bring it back to Zelda, I would say for someone who's never played a game before, maybe Ocarina of Time, and the remake of Ocarina of Time.
Oh, okay.
On the 3DS.
3DS, yeah.
Yeah, because again, the story is quite straightforward. It's simple, but it's effective in kind of getting you into the world, teaching you how to play the game, and just getting you invested in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to do. It's an easy game to just pick up and play. And that's not knocking it. I'm not saying it's an overly simple game or anything like that. I think it does a lot right to kind of get you invested in the plot, the characters, and the world. And the gameplay is good. The gameplay is still quite good to this day. Like it's fine. Like it's not complicated. I don't know. I feel like I'm knocking the game while trying to recommend it. It's strange. But I think it is a game that is easy to get into for someone who's never played a game before. And even for someone like yourself who's never played a Zelda game before, it kind of ticks the boxes.
Yeah, I think I might have to go and grab me a copy of this. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you my 3DS. You can play it on that.
Ah, you're very kind.
Well, I still have your PSP, so I'll trade it. So and I actually have the Majora's Mask remake as well.
But for me, like when I hear you talking so highly about the Zelda franchise, and I've never played a Zelda game, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, I think I might give this a look, because you were the person who got me into Hollow Knight and Dark Souls and Persona. What else have you got me into? You got me into a lot of stuff, man.
I think you said Mass Effect.
And Mass Effect, yes, of course, Mass Effect. So there's been so many different titles that you've introduced me to. So when you say Zelda, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I might give this a look now.
Well, look, I'm not using my 3DS. If you decide you want to borrow it and you want to try out some Zeldas.
But you would recommend somebody who's never played a video game to play?
I think Ocarina is good because it is straightforward. As I said, it's a safe Zelda game that ticks all the boxes. It shows you what the games are right off the bat, what kind of game you're playing. But it also delves into other things. So, there's interesting story moments, interesting character moments. There's fun gameplay mechanics. There's elements of, maybe there's something darker going on here. There's a couple of bits of horror, like that kind of stuff. So it's a kind of a jack of all trades video game.
Yeah.
Which I think is good. It's not overly complicated, but it's not too simplistic as to be boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that works. I think that's a great starting point for people.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are better games. For example, my partner plays Animal Crossing. I love Animal Crossing. That shit is the bomb. It's the kind of game I love to play to just mellow out.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a game with an end game per se. That's a game to be played over a period of time, and you kind of just come back to it and play it
The
again.
music in Animal Crossing is actually pretty relaxing, I must say.
Oh, it's lovely. It's such
really
a
mellow. It's just gorgeous. Like
it's a lovely experience,
yes.
Playing through it. And I can't recommend that enough.
That was one of the games that popped up on my newsfeed on YouTube, and actually influenced me to write a more mellow kind of piece.
Ooh,
yeah, that's
interesting.
That's where Harbour came from.
Oh, yeah, that's very interesting. I like Harbour.
The piece that I wrote for Harbour was very, very heavily influenced by Animal Crossing, and I never played that game before. It just popped up on my newsfeed on YouTube, and I was listening to it. I was like, "Oh shit, that's cute,"
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. So funny how sometimes that'll happen where it kind of bleeds out beyond the experience of actually playing it.
Yeah.
Man, video games.
Yeah. Well, look, it's great to have this chat with you again, and really, really appreciate your time. I know you're a very, very busy dude at this moment in time, but like for everybody who's been listening to our first podcast, even returning listeners and even viewers on the YouTube channel, we are still trying to get the video aspect kind of working for YouTube, and we're just about there. So please have a bit of patience with us, guys. We're nearly there. But
we got to finish Metal Gear.
yeah, and we will get there. We're right on the cuff now. But what I want to say is, like, Shephard, thank you so much for joining me and giving me your time on this second edition of the Save Point podcast, which is available now on Spotify and on YouTube. And I'm looking forward to having another dialogue with you, and when we finish off the final video for Metal Gear. So to everybody who's been listening, I have been your host, Joker.
I've been your co-host, Shephard.
Take it easy, guys, and see you later.
Thank you very much.